Okay, thank you. Good morning and welcome to the delegates who have joined us for this session. We are going to be looking at early childhood development. My name is Kanyisa Diamond. I am your moderator for this session. I would like to welcome our panelists. On the panel today, we have Justine. We have Nicole Biondi from Innovation Edge. We also have Grace Matlape.
Sadly not Grace, actually me in her place.
That's why I got confused.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So Justine is from Smart Start.
Yeah.
And then we also have Megan Blair on the far right from Early Bird Education at Work, Educare at Work. Welcome, ladies, and we're looking forward to hearing your insights for today. Before we kick off the session, I just want to speak to our delegates and to just tell you that if you're wanting to post questions and you are directing them to the panelists, please make sure that you do specify for whom is the question, and also please make them very short. There is a chat function which we will not be looking at, so focus on the question, on the Q&A, and that's where you should post your questions. And then we will also be running a poll as well. So to start off with our discussions for this session, I'd like to just look at a few things. So in terms of the early childhood development, we know that the National Development Plan envisages that every child will have access to the full range of ECD services by 2030. And in this session, we are going to focus at the full spectrum of early childhood development, which includes physical, socio-emotional, cognitive, and motor development between the ages of 0 to up to 8 years of age. So some progress on the policy front and on child development outcomes have been made. For example, the National Integrated Early Childhood Development Policy was adopted in 2015, while maternal and child mortality rates have continued on a downward trend. However, we still have a lot of work that we need to do, and we're hoping that our panelists today could then give us some insight on what can be done differently in order for us to reach the goals that are envisaged by the National Development Plan. So the latest South African Early Childhood Review, which was done last year in 2019, in the main, it does show that we've made some progress. However, there are some areas where we have made no progress at all. For example, the stunting rate remains unacceptably high at 27%. And of the 5 components which are essential for childhood development, our provision in 3 of those is still very poor. For example, nutrition support still lacks, support for primary caregivers and stimulation for early learning still lacks. So on the other hand, for provision of social services and income support, we are considered to be fair, while primary level maternal and child health is also considered to be good. As a result of not being able to master all 5, South African children are surviving rather than thriving. And so the question is, with 10 years left to 2030, what do we need to do innovatively today and moving forward to change the situation that we find ourselves in as far as early childhood development is concerned? So Justine, I'm going to start with you.
With me.
And I'm going to ask you to give us a quick and concise opening statement. But while you do that, if you could include in that, recently Smart Start published a paper arguing that a systems intervention is needed to close the provisioning gap. which is between those who have and those who do not have. We have about 1 million children who are left behind as far as early childhood development is concerned. So please describe the systems intervention you envisage and the role of various stakeholders in it.
Great. Thank you, Kanisa, and thanks for having me here. I look forward to sharing with you all today a bit about Smart Start and our approach to supporting access to quality early learning for all South African children. As Kanisa said, we know if we want to improve outcomes for children, we need to aim for universal access to a comprehensive package of ECD services as soon as possible. But the size of that challenge is significant. If we just look at early learning stimulation, also as Kanisa mentioned, it's estimated that 1.2 million children aged 3 to 4 are not attending an early learning program or are attending inappropriate provision. Of these, over 900,000 are poor children. We don't have the venues nor the trained ECD practitioners to reach these children. And so every year, another group of children lose out on the opportunity for early learning stimulation that could build the foundations needed for greater success in their lives. As Kanisa mentioned, the government has set the goal of achieving universal access to ECD by 2030. And in order to do this, for all 3 to 5-year-olds, we need over 100,000 new early learning practitioners and over 40,000 new venues. Without a human resource pipeline and sufficient venues for early learning programs, it will be impossible to improve access for children. What's more, in order to reach these high numbers of excluded children, system capacity must be expanded, and this needs to be done fast to bring the children in sooner. Even with all these challenges, we also know that there's a massive pool of untapped human capital in South Africa. So early learning programs have the potential to create direct employment and support micro-enterprise development for women in particular. There's also the opportunity to support expansion by using existing premises such as homes, meaning that scaling is not slowed down or made unaffordable by thousands of building projects. To achieve universal access as fast as possible, what is needed are systems interventions which can close the provisioning gap by integrating every stage of the service delivery continuum. So for example, recruitment, training, quality assurance, while at the same time providing the architecture and the systems for establishing and managing systems at scale. This is what Kanisa mentions we describe in the paper, which is what we call a national delivery platform. And we see this as offering a new way of thinking about the provision of early learning. A national early learning delivery platform is not simply a bigger NGO or service. It's a new approach which is designed at the outset for scale, linking up different providers and stakeholders, and provides the operational architecture that enables it to keep expanding until all children are reached. Smart Start is an example of a national delivery platform. In the South African context, so the successful national delivery platform would need to have these components. Establish a practitioner recruitment system with accessible entry points, provide a managed and safe process for onboarding new venues using existing premises, building a locally appropriate curriculum that can be realistically implemented in a wide range of resource-constrained settings. It should hold practitioners in a system of support and development, so not just train and leave, have robust quality assurance systems across the network, hold unit costs low, and align to and support regulatory compliance. It's around these requirements that Smart Start is designed. Smart Start is South Africa's first full-service early learning delivery platform. Under a social franchise model, implementing partners, our franchises, license and support early learning practitioners to deliver the same evidence-based program for 3 to 5-year-olds. We currently have 13 franchises. These are independently, locally based NGOs operating across 9 provinces whose experience and assets are essential in the program's success, with the Smart Start platform linking up all their contributions and providing the systems for growth. The program is supported by operational tools and play materials, a network of clubs, and a team of coaches who support the licensing and quality assurance. We've developed a recruitment system which is accessible and have a managed and safe process for onboarding new venues so that we can use existing premises without having to build new. Partnerships with government public works programs have unlocked stipend support for those operating in the poorest areas, while partnerships with funders have enabled the development and operationalization of the system that then supports that delivery nationwide. In the 5 years since setup, the social franchise model has enabled Smart Start to reach over 75,000 children. We have nearly 4,000 active early learning facilitators running independent early learning programs. These are mainly women, many previously unemployed, who now operate their programs largely from homes or community venues. In 2019, an independent evaluation of the progress of children attending Smart Start confirmed that it was achieving positive outcomes for children. If we're going to succeed in achieving the goal of universal access, we all need to see early learning as part of our future. The evidence tells us that the foundations for successful learning in school and beyond are established before the age of 5. We cannot afford to neglect it at this critical stage. We need to focus on aligning the interests and capabilities of government, corporates, funders, NGOs, and ECD providers by building national delivery platforms for early learning. Smart Start has shown this is possible, and if we align support across the sector, we believe a number of early learning delivery platforms could emerge. This is essential if we're going to achieve population level change, both in educational outcomes for children, but also in wider positive outcomes for society.
Thank you, Justine. I think I'm going to hand over to you, Nicole. And I think while you're sharing with us on some of the innovative ways in how you have invested and what you have achieved in early childhood development, take us also through an understanding of, if Kulula says there's going to be a transition of early childhood development to the Department of Basic Education, and with all the systemic needs that have been identified by Justine, where are we in that conversation? And as the operators and strategists who've learned all there is to learn on the sector, how are you feeding into that process?
Thank you very much, Kanisa, and good morning to the delegates and to my fellow panelists. I'm going to start off by speaking about some of the, well, not some, only two, in fact, because that's all time allows, two of the innovations that I think this audience will find most interesting and relevant that Innovation Edge has invested in. And then, Kanisa, I'll speak a little bit, if time allows, to your question around where are we at with DBE and what is required in terms of systems. So as you mentioned earlier on, what is really important is ensuring that caregivers are given the support they need to help them to equip their children for lifelong success. So one of the examples I'll give you is aimed at caregivers, and the other one is really aimed at supporting early learning programs, because one of the many things that early learning programs need is that they need quality early learning resources. Now, I'm going to give you an example of an investment we made with a company called Barrows, and the initiative was really around looking at repurposing for purpose. So let me start off by what Barrows does. They are a design and manufacturing company, and they produce display units for retailers all over South Africa. So you know, when you go to the store, when you see toothpaste or soap or chocolates on display, those display units, that's what Barrows does, well, among other things. And they also have a national distribution system and that reaches 9 hubs across the country. Now, this is where it gets interesting. See, Barrows realized that every time they did a print run of their display units, and those are usually around 7,000 units in about 30 minutes, they'd end up with so-called waste in the form of blank spaces on the production setups. So imagine with me for a moment these massive machines running and these flat packs of cardboard going through these machines that get assembled later on and turned into these display units. And on a portion of the cardboard, there's artwork for, let's say, Colgate or a soap company, but then there's some blank space. And after hearing about the hundreds of early learning centers in South Africa that are in need of quality educational materials, the creative director of Barrows, Ian Gawley, realized that the artwork for early learning materials like posters or flashcards could in fact be placed on these unused blank spaces as part of the production process. Now see, the print run is already scheduled and it's paid for by the client. And so what happens is that these early learning materials can be produced at little or, well, very, very marginal additional cost. And so what happens is that Barrows is then able to produce their work for their client, plus the early learning materials, and then they're able to use their 9 distribution hubs and their transport system to distribute these early learning materials to centers who need it most. Now, our investment as Innovation Edge really helped them to test whether or not they could bake this into their usual business process. Now, what do I mean by bake it in? So really have it as part of their core business offering, as opposed to what Ian calls bolting it on, which is the sort of more standard CSI approach, which is in addition to their core business practice. And so the result is that right now they are able to provide per month over 50,000 pieces of educational material to children in underserved communities. Now, what's innovative about this particular initiative is that it really leverages unused or previously unused business inventory and existing business processes to create the quality product that addresses the educational need at little or no extra cost to the business. And at the same time, the initiative has a really positive impact on Barrows in a number of ways that ultimately benefits the business's bottom line. So including, for example, offering social impact value add, so strengthening its BBBE scorecard. And what was really interesting was when Ian gave us feedback, he said one of the most unexpected things that happened as a result of this initiative was that the staff were really inspired. And so all of a sudden, his team members were coming to work and going, we have a real purpose. We are doing something to make a difference in South Africa. And so that actually also helped with retention. And I'm happy to say that the initiative is now functioning at scale. We invested in the pilot, it's now at scale with the help of the Do More Foundation, also do wonderful work in nutrition. The second investment I'll quickly touch on is one that we made with a company called Out There Media. They are a mobile content distribution company, and the initiative that we invested in with them is called 3 Little Minutes. And essentially what 3 Little Minutes is a mobile messaging campaign where caregivers are sent an SMS. The SMS then directs them to a free-to-use backend Mobi site, and the Mobi site is responsive to both feature and to smartphones. And on that Mobi site, they can access roughly 3 little minutes, so 3-minute songs or stories at absolutely no data cost. They can go back into that Mobi site as many times as they want to. And the idea really is with this investment is to provide caregivers, busy caregivers in low-income settings, with a means of talking and singing and playing with their children every day as a way of boosting brain development. Now, what's great about this particular platform that Out There Media uses, it's called Mobux, is that it links the mobile operator and the mobile operator industry with companies, businesses wanting to advertise to very specific audiences. So they're able to provide a really granular targeting of audiences and really great analytics. So you're able to see exactly who your messages are reaching, when they're reaching them, and are they having the desired impact. Now, the business opportunity, because you might be wondering now why on earth would Out There Media want to do this or pursue this particular type of initiative, they launched a new business arm, I suppose you'd call it, called Out There Impact. And what they're really doing is looking for businesses who are interested in sponsoring content that will make a difference. So they're able to meet their business imperative of growing their company essentially and creating revenue, but at the same time, really making a difference to children and to caregivers. So those are just 2 examples, and you're welcome to look at our website, innovationedge.org, for more. But Denise, just very quickly to answer your question, one of the things that is absolutely required to make systems change is to understand what's happening. So the data piece is what I'm referring to. And it's really important that government and all other stakeholders involved in the system understand the kind of early childhood outcomes that are currently happening and what some of the shifts or what the shifts are that need to happen to improve early childhood outcomes. So something that we're working with government on at the moment is embedding a data system within government so that they can do national early child assessments every year to be able to understand across different domains, so early literacy, numeracy, etc., to understand where children are at the point of them entering school, so that we can start to measure in the same way we measure And every year we get excited and rather frustrated about the matric results. We really want to help South Africa to get excited about how children are entering school, because if we can shift the way they're entering school, we can surely shift the way that they're leaving school. And I'll leave it for there now. Thank you for the opportunity.
Definitely. I'm going to ask you a question which you can answer later on. We're going to give Megan a chance. With the platform that you're using to communicate with caregivers, earlier in the session, we heard Kulula speak about family literacy. So is any of it using language that's accessible to parents, or is it all in English? Because we do know that language is one of the barriers that prohibits efficient learning for learners and for parents to support their children. Hold that thought. Megan, let's hand over to you. Based on your business model and based on what you've heard from Justine in terms of what could translate into systemic provision of ECD, which lever is Early Bird using to improve access to ECD services? And what have you seen in terms of the results in the model that you are using?
Thanks, Kanisa. I'll dive right in and say that that lever is partnerships with corporates, businesses, and property developers, actually. And I'll explain why in a minute. But so Early Bird is a social enterprise, and we do have an unusual business model, as your question alluded to. But two pairs of facts really help frame our business model, what we're trying to do. And the first one, Justine already noted, which is that sort of, over 1 million children under age 5 are just not getting any kind of access to any level of early childhood development services before they begin school. And we're seeing this translate into the second part of my pair of facts here, which is that 78% of children in grade 4 can't read for meaning, which is incredibly, incredibly problematic. And there's a direct relation, and that's why, as Nicole says, we need to measure school readiness, and we need to be having kids start school ready so that they can actually gain that emergent literacy and language acquisition. I have lots of thoughts on multilingual emergent literacy language acquisition as well, Kanisa. So there's no doubt that there's a quantity and quality issue in the early childhood development sector. That's my first set of facts. The second is that, according to McKinsey, only 8% of C-suite positions in South Africa are held by women, and only 23% of middle management positions are held by women. And since you guys know we, as women, make up 50% of the population, that's a problem. And so how is our innovative business model seeking to address these worrying numbers, and how can you as the business community get involved? Well, there's sort of two parts to our model. We have a for-profit, Early Bird Pty, and a non-profit, Early Bird NPC. Early Bird Pty provides on-site, high-quality educare services to businesses. This is businesses looking to attract and retain top talent, at least half of which is female, and specifically, often in the sort of middle upward curve of a parent's career is when they start to have children, and there's a huge, huge issue with post-maternity and paternity leave attrition. Businesses lose valuable employees who they've invested in. Mom comes back through the doors, she can't hold her baby with her, and it's just incredibly difficult. Likewise with that. So we open up high-quality educare centers at companies like Siemens, RB, ABSA, a large number of sort of well-known names. Old Mutual actually has an on-site educare facility that we don't run, but it is a proven model. And you do see, after 5 years of an on-site high-quality educare service being provided to children from 3 months of age, so on return from maternity leave till 5 years, you do see serious improvement in productivity. So that's via reduction in single-day leave taking. You see a lot less single-day leave taking by working parents once this intervention is introduced. So it has bottom line benefits. You also see much more female participation in middle and upper management positions just within 5 years of introducing an intervention like this. So it really is an inclusivity intervention, and again, has serious bottom line benefits from a productivity and retention point of view. Also, on a slightly softer note, Early Bird really differentiates ourselves by seeing that what parents want for their kids is not just high quality. Of course, every parent wants their child to start school ready and ready to make the most of school and having a head start. And that's what we provide. We have a very evidence-based model, and we partnered with sort of industry leaders like WordWorks and RMAS to develop our content. But not just that, we care about inclusivity and cohesion, 21st century skills like critical thinking, patterning. These are the basis of sort of coding skills, but mostly cooperation and collaboration, which we really put a lot of emphasis in our models. And it goes through just from not just the kids. We really think of our centers as pillars within the community that is a business. So whether you're at the holiday concert in the Siemens Auditorium, seeing all the parents sort of seeing their kids there, it's just wonderful. We really see ourselves as building community wherever our centers are. And that's a role that schools and early education centers should be able to play. So Early Bird sees ourselves as an inclusivity and cohesion promoting intervention, as well as a bottom line benefit for HR departments. So that's wonderful if we're able to, if you have a big enough business to be able to open up an educare on site, definitely, get in touch. We'd love to chat to you more about how to go about doing that. And we see the benefits to both parents and children for that. And it really reduces the career family trade-off that we are all facing. But if you're a smaller business in an office park, we often partner with corporate property developers to be able to provide a center within a number of different, the vicinity of a number of different companies. So that's also an option. So again, a world-class model and lots of communication with parents. Donnie's taking his first steps. Don't you want to come down? You don't want to miss this milestone. Lunchtime seminars to support parents. We know that parenting is extremely hard. Everything from breastfeeding to positive behavior management, sibling rivalry, and so on. And we do offer in-service sort of sessions before we open a center to just understand what the parents at your company are battling with most. And soon an online portal to support them as well. So that's the for-profit. And that's the revenue from that for-profit arm cross-subsidizes provision of the same high-quality model, which it took us 5 years to develop, and a lot of work interpreting the evidence and understanding what really works internationally in terms of what improves kids' school readiness scores, those specific assessments that Nicole is referring to, what works to improve them and get kids ready, and then applying that and testing it and iterating on it within the South African context. So it took us a long time to develop this model. We're very proud of it. It has a multilingual emergent literacy component to it. It's really looking at 21st century skills. And we spent so long developing that model, we thought, like Nicole says, it's not a bolt-on thing. We can actually just use this. Part of our core business is delivering high quality educare. Let's package this. It's been packaged for scale. We have tablet-based supports for teachers. They have a way of taking attendance when they arrive in the morning. They have photos that show them what kinds of activities they can do. We have messages to parents about what vocabulary they should focus on in a given weekend. All of that exists in a very scalable format. So why not package that and provide it to social franchisees? So somewhat similarly to the way Smart Start works, but opposite to a traditional franchise model where the franchisor receives money from the franchisees, we submit money to our franchisees. So we help young Black female entrepreneurs set up social franchise sites, and we call these blue door sites. So this is Early Bird MPC, raises money, grant fundraisers currently, and also gets some support from the Early Bird PTY in terms of revenue, but a lot of also implicit cross-subsidy through all of our team's time and our IP. And these blue door franchisees set up really high quality educare centers in low income settings. So either quintile 1 low income communities in the vicinity of no fee schools. We have 2 sites open in Kailicha, for example. And there the average income is below 4,000 Rand a month in the households we're serving. But then you also serve quintile 2 and 3 families through partnerships with social housing developers. So social housing developers are building large communities, and we work with them, and they're incentivized to actually build schools within their developments by the SHRA, the government resource agency that funds these developments. And we work with them to then, they cover all upfront infrastructure costs. And so we only need to grant fundraise a small amount, a couple of 100,000 Rand, to fit out those centers and to do the training and recruit and get the franchisees up and running. And then we provide ongoing support. And this is what Justine said is absolutely crucial. It's one of those core pillars for scalable impact, is provide ongoing support. And we can afford to do that because our PTY, Early Bird PTY, is covering the cost of our team's time to be able to provide that ongoing support. So our franchisees, it's really a catalytic investment from any CSR department or any grantor or donor that decides to fund the start of a Blue Door site. It's an upfront investment to cover the fitting out of the school. Again, we partner with other infrastructure partners to cover the infrastructure costs. And then you put that once-off catalytic investment and the school runs in an operationally self-sustaining way after the first year, after it's ramped up to full enrollment. It takes about a year. So yeah, as business, that's a great opportunity. A once-off investment gets a school, sets up a high-quality education center and a small business which is self-sustaining.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. I really like the idea of a self-sustaining model because while we wait for government and the private sector to make up their minds, work can continue. And one of the questions from the Q&A, which is directed at you, Megan, is that how have you found the appetite from CSI investment funders to early bird, considering you are a social enterprise? Are they open to invest in either on your legal entities, not just the NPO entity?
So yes, in fact, so Innovation Edge, who Nicole represents, they have invested as a social investor in our PTY, in the for-profit entity, as an investor who seeks sub-market returns and looks for essentially a blended return. So they care a lot about the impact, those child readiness scores and how many children we're reaching and the income that those children come from, the families that they come from. So that matters, and we have a number of other investors who've gotten involved at that level. But for the most part, from a CSI perspective, we do offer companies, we are a registered PBO, we offer an opportunity for them to invest. Essentially, it's a grant. It's not an investment in the traditional sense of the word. It is an investment in children's future. So we have an MPC vehicle which has PBO status that we can work with CSI departments.
I see. And for you, Justine, the question here is, how can this new system, the system's capacity you speak of, how can it be accessed by tertiary institutions? And then with you, Nicole, the question is, the transition to the Department of Basic Education is taking too long. And how can we inject a sense of urgency in the system just to get things going? So we'll start with you, Justine.
Great, thanks. And thanks for the question. I think a national delivery platform, whether it be Smart Start or another, the critical piece that one's looking for is how you knit different stakeholders together with a strong foundation that will operationalize that. So instead of looking for piecemeal approaches, which is how we've tended to approach ECD and many development funding projects, you would rather be looking at how you could knit it across. So in our model, for example, supporting the whole continuum of service delivery from recruitment to initial training, we already look at partnerships for a level 4 qualification. We don't invest in that in the beginning because we're looking at bringing in practitioners early to be able to meet children right now and support them with programs right now. But over time, our franchisees, our Smart Starters, start progressing and developing in their careers, and then we do partnerships with TVETs and tertiary institutions around a level 4 qualification. So again, it's about creating those partnerships so that you can leverage that across a system and create a united continuum of services so that it really strengthens things. So I hope that answers the question that was asked.
Thank you for that. Nicole, when you respond to your question, can you please also touch back on the family literacy question that I had mentioned? After Nicole, can we please have the results of the poll from the administrator?
Thank you, Kanisa. So I'll take the question around injecting a sense of urgency in DBE. And the short answer is, I don't think that is possible. What I do, however, think is possible is to consider the question, what might we do to really enable DBE to, so let's call it hit the ground running when they do take over. So what's happening at the moment because of COVID is that the ECD sector is in a dire state for a number of reasons. But I think one of the biggest challenges that COVID has presented, and I'm sure Justine and Megan could add to this, is the fact that there was simply no income coming into ECD centers. So there was a study that was done in April where 99% of the operators, there were 8,500 operators who were surveyed, and 99% of them said that parents were not able to continue paying fees for obvious reasons. They themselves were out of work, right? At the same time, the government, the Department of Social Development, in fact, stopped paying early childhood subsidies to most provinces except the Western Cape. And so what you find now is a situation, a new study was just done a couple of weeks ago that shows that what's probably happening is that around 100,000 practitioners stand to lose their jobs. That leaves 1.8 million children without anywhere to go. So urgent support, urgent financial support is needed by the sector to get it back on its feet and up and running, so that when DBE does take over, there's an actual sector to support. So I thought I'd make that point. On the question around language, absolutely. So a very interesting stat, and it's a global stat. There are about 221 million children around the world today who don't have access to early learning in their own minority language. 221 million children. And I'm not sure if you're aware, or if the delegates are aware, but the 2022 signals the decade of Indigenous and minority languages by UNESCO. And so there's a very big focus on this for obvious reasons. Now, to get back to your original question around our initiative, the pilot unfortunately was only in English. However, the idea is for the next stage to absolutely include more languages. What's wonderful is that the content on the system is provided by Bookdash and by Nali Bali, and they do have content in various South African languages, excuse me. And what's wonderful is that they are provided in the form of songs and stories, as in they're being told, as in not to read. And so even if the parent is not able to read, the parent is still able to engage with their child and the content because it is being delivered in an oral fashion. And I just quickly wanted to say that there is an app that I'm aware of. We haven't invested in it, but I'm aware of it, called Feed the Monster. Sorry, there's something flying in front of the screen. And it's an early literacy app that was developed. It's open source. Anyone can download it. It's free of charge. And that's available in 23 African languages and 50 international minority languages. Feed the Monster. So quite an interesting one to check out.
Okay, thank you so much. Administrator, we ran a poll and the question was, which ECD interventions does the delegates think is more effective? Can you show us the results? So 53% of people said that training teachers will be more effective. I would like our panelists to respond. Each of you must respond to that result, followed by providing equipment and providing nutrition and helping with registration. So what are your views on that, particularly around training teachers?
I'm happy to go first. Firstly, I just wanted to say, I mean, it's one of those complex issues, because if you say which ECD, oh, can you keep it, the poll up there? Sorry, it's just been taken off. But if you, great, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I see that. But if you think of what ECD interventions are most effective, I want to just take us back to Nicole's point about stunting in the country. And we don't look at nutrition because I think we feel it should be provided by the state or by someone else, and yet it is so essential. We, in our outcomes evaluation that I mentioned in my brief statement around showing the progress in the Smart Start program, what we could see in that program is the huge impact of stunting. So those children in our program who were stunted, who just made progress, but started at such a low base, and the progress was just, it was just not the same as for kids in another quintile. So my response is yes, I would put training teachers there, but together with what all of us have said actually, which is that it's not enough to train. In fact, that is the sort of piecemeal approach we've had, which is like, we'll give everyone the skills and we'll leave it. We have to think about the nutrition, because that's critical for children's development, but also where are these practitioners going to operate? How are they getting an income? You know, those two things have to be part of the process. We need venues and sustainable incomes for people, because ECD is not government provided. It is a public-private partnership, and therefore training alone is not going to give us the results that we're looking for.
We need a holistic approach. Megan, what would be your view and response?
Absolutely. So completely echo everything Justine said. And I would say that to the point where you could assume that you could get the building infrastructure right and get kids fed with basic nutritional, meet their nutritional requirements, which are absolutely crucial first steps, assuming, and I would argue as well, preventing exposure to violence, because that is not on the list, but it's incredibly important. The toxic stress affects brain development immensely. Assuming you could get those basic sort of almost to ground zero level, then yes, training is has been shown in all of the research that we have to be the most effective way to improve child outcomes. So training the teachers directly. ECD, unfortunately, unlike sort of primary and high school, where we're looking at sort of blended learning models, where you can replace a teacher to some extent. I'm a teacher myself, so I'm not saying, but to some extent, augment a teacher's service provision with sort of virtual or video-based training. Early childhood is not really a phase where that is crucial. The human is incredibly important. Those attachments, secure attachment relationships are absolutely crucial. And so training is important, but I will say how. How do you train? And this is one of the features that actually the education sectors, academics in education have kind of finally coalesced and agreed on over the last 10 years, that in-service training is crucial. What they call just-in-time pedagogical support. So meeting a teacher on a weekly or monthly basis and saying, what are you battling with this week? So having 24, 58 modules that are available that you could train a teacher on, but actually picking out a module based on what the teacher is battling with. And so that's been proven to be exponentially more effective in pre-service. And as we know, I mean, education is no different. You learn on the job much more effectively.
Yeah.
So training important, and then, sorry, go ahead.
Please go ahead.
I was just going to say the helping with registration, the one piece I would say on that, and this is what Justine said, it's all interlinked, it's really hard to choose. I'll just give you one fact, which is that the current per child subsidy, if the centre is lucky enough to get registered, so as Justine mentioned, it is a public partnership to an extent, in that the government leaves ECD provision up to private providers, and if those providers qualify, they can get a subsidy of 15 Rand per child per day, up to a certain cap of enrollment. Firstly, it's difficult to get that subsidy, access it, but our numbers show that if you could move that subsidy up from 15 Rand a day to 17 Rand a day, it makes a huge difference. We could double the number of centers we're opening and franchisees we're opening, because just the financial viability, then you can afford to pay back some initial infrastructure. If you could have an initial loan to cover it, it's just a huge difference that just that small increase in the subsidy would make. And it's been stuck at 15 Rand for, Nicole will be able to fact check me here, but I think at least the last 5 years that I'm aware of, it's been stuck at 15 Rand per child per day, and is difficult to get access to. So you can't leave provision up to the private market in a highly unequal society and then not subsidize the lower end of the service provision spectrum. It's just unacceptable, truly.
Thank you, Megan. We have run out of time. Nicole, I will ask you for your closing statement. But for those of you who have more questions that I could not get to in terms of the delegates, there is a networking session that our panel will be joining soon after. Please do join them there, and then some of your questions can be answered in that session. Nicole, your closing shot?
Thank you, Kanisa, and thank you for the time. So my closing shot is really an appeal to the delegates who are watching us today, to, as you think about how you support ECD, to yes, absolutely think about how can you support external ECD providers, but a challenge is to look through the lens of internal. So what I mean by that is how might you support your own employees and your own employees' children and their early childhood development. So an example is, might you be able to provide employees with an early childhood subsidy so that they're able to send their children to quality educare? What can you be doing around parental leave? How can you really enable caregivers to support their children in the first 1,000 days of life? So that's my appeal. Look inside as well as outside. Thank you.
Thank you. Great work, ladies. It's been a pleasure to have this conversation with you. Delegates, please do join us. We can continue the conversation in the networking session. Take care.